Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call to order the January 13th, 2025 Lake Washington School Board Study Session. Let the record reflect that all school board members are present, and we've got two of our student representatives with us here this afternoon. Tonight's topic is going to be inclusionary practice update. Dr. Holman, I will pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we have Dr. Shannon Hitch here tonight to provide a formal update and presentation. I did want to start with just kind of a set related to this work. We have been on the journey related to very specific inclusionary practices for our qualified students for 5, 6 very specific years. Even as I think about the work in Lake Washington for years and years, has been about how do we provide the best supports, instruction, services for students. And so I think about just my time in the district and the different opportunities that I have had to support students of various needs and abilities, and students that were just arriving to this country and didn't speak English, and so incorporating students into my classroom as a teacher and as a principal. And so tonight our focus is on students that qualify for special education services, even though we know that inclusion is really about every student having a place in our schools, learning with their peers, participating fully, being seen for who they are. And to that end, I did a quick overview of the board's current operational expectation policies just to remind myself where are some of the highlights of where the board already speaks to inclusion, even as I know the board is thinking about are there policy updates that would be beneficial and helpful related to this commitment that we've made as an organization and a value that the board holds. And it was striking as I was going through the policies, the operational expectation 3 that the board has recently adopted that we'll be talking about indicators, interpretation and indicators tonight, was kind of interesting related to this work, because it really is about how do we build those connections with our families related to their knowledge of their child, their lived experiences, and how does that help inform our work in the development of, in this case, an individualized education program for students. And so you can see here, there's policy language that we'll go into in much more depth later tonight in our board meeting, but the idea of build relationships among families and between families and educators through opportunities to interact in meaningful ways, seek out and value the perspective of families in recognition of their source of knowledge, expertise, and solutions, work to ensure that families have information and resources they need to support their children's learning, provide educators with the opportunities to learn from families and community members, to encourage reflection on practices, and ensure that decisions regarding students begin with, prioritize, are informed by, and are responsive to family goals and concerns. And as I think about the whole IEP process, maybe I hadn't connected this language directly to that, but it's kind of interesting to know what the law says about that process, and really what the board has adopted here. The next one I looked at that I thought spoke directly to this was OE10, Learning Environment Treatment of Students. Even as we're thinking about policy updates for this, but current language, maintain a collaborative school culture that ensures high expectations and success for all children in all classrooms through equitable and aligned systems and supports. And 10.2, ensure an inclusive, equitable, welcoming, and safe school environment. OE11, and I just grabbed the opening statement that the board makes related to OE11, because the entire operational expectation related to instruction, it applies to all of our students. And so I could have copy and pasted the entire policy here, but it really is about every student deserves to have high expectations, to have a rigorous academic program, to have staff that understand and know how to provide rigorous instruction, all so that our students are working towards the results policies of the board. And so that's kind of an exciting way to think about inclusion, that really all of our policies and all of our goals are related to all of our students. We don't set some students aside because maybe their challenge is greater, maybe they're starting at a different place than others. Our goal is that all of our students meet all of our results policies, and that's really what these next two policies really focus on as well. Operational Expectation 12, and to be honest with you, I thought as I put an inclusionary lens to our facilities policy, I wondered if there was some work to be done there as well, because it doesn't speak directly to inclusion, even though we know that the physical built environment actually plays a key role in supporting inclusionary practices. But even without that, our facilities policy points to that the work related to facilities is about the accomplishment of the board's results policies, and if results policies apply to all students, then our facilities also need to align with that. Technology, again, it speaks again to the accomplishment of the board's results policies. We know technology plays a key role for our students. And then OE 14, the word inclusion is throughout this policy. I'm not going to read each and every one of these, but the opening of OE 14 talks about that the board believes that each student has the potential to achieve at high levels and to accomplish significant academic and personal goals, period. It's not qualified. There's no, with the exception of, it's for each and every student in Lake Washington. The board believes that each student can achieve at high levels and accomplish significant academic and personal goals. It goes on to say, providing equitable and inclusive learning and working environments for all students and staff. And so really the commitment to inclusive environments is throughout the board's operational expectations already. And I know there's places that we can strengthen it because it truly is a commitment of this board. We also know that we have a law that is part of this work as well, that we have to understand, implement, and work through for the development of what is an individualized education program. I know a lot of people say an IEP is an individualized education plan, but it actually is a program. And I actually prefer that word to plan, because a program really does define the experience of a student rather than just an action plan. And so the program that is developed, and the end of this sentence states that this involvement is of parents. This involvement is a cornerstone of the IEP process to ensure that the educational needs of children with disabilities are effectively addressed. And so really the IDEA prioritizes parent involvement, parent knowledge, and parent participation as equal participants in the IEP process. And I think that's an important aspect to this. That also makes this process uniquely challenging, because you can have multiple perspectives coming into a conversation about a single student. As we think about another hallmark of IDEA, that's the least restrictive environment. And anytime I hear least restrictive environment, I almost want to say, as defined by whom? Because again, you have multiple individuals coming to a conversation who may have a different viewpoint on access to educational opportunities and where a child can receive benefit as they are working on their individualized goals. And so the IDEA mandates that students with disabilities should be educated alongside their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent appropriate. And it's that qualifier that that there, for years and years and years, has been difficulty and challenge to understand what does appropriate mean. And so as I think about, we have this distinct value related to inclusion, yet we have the requirement to hold multiple things as true at the same time. And so inclusion is a driving value in Lake Washington School District, and it's a value that we are continually working to incorporate and embed in the work that is occurring in each of our schools. You'll hear tonight Dr. Hitch talk about the journey, because each person, each team, each school, and our district is on a journey working towards this value and finding ways to embed it into the work and experience of our students. This board has a value related to parent voice and knowledge of their child. That's a value that I've heard each of you talk about consistently. And as we think about inclusion as a value here and parent voice, engagement, knowledge of their child here, at times, those two things can be at odds with one another. And that is the work of that IEP team to work through. We have a requirement to hold true a range of placement options as well as a continuum of services. These are things that the law requires that we maintain and that we consider, and that decision making is through the IEP process. And so this is exciting work. I'm proud of the growth that this organization has made, and I know we have so much work to do to truly get to that ideal state where we want to be for all students. And so to me, that's the excitement around this work. I know I spoke with the board 5 years ago when we were thinking about me leading this organization, and that was one of the primary things I talked about, was working towards increasing the inclusionary opportunities for our students. And I didn't know exactly what that pathway would be. I didn't know exactly what it would look like. And it's exciting to see as we continue to make progress as an organization, as a community, and the work ahead. And so as I think about this work, I think this is lifetime work. This isn't work that all of a sudden one day it will be solved. It is work that we will always continually be working on because as staff change, as parents change, as students show up as individuals, our goal to have them partnering with peers, learning with peers, alongside of peers is exceptional work. And so I share that. I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Dr. Hitch, who has done a nice job of capturing a number of different elements of the work as it's been going. And so, as I said to Shannon earlier today, as the board has questions, please let us know. This is the indication that someone has a question, just so you know. And so we'll call on people. And I told Shannon the response of we'll have to follow up is always an acceptable response, because better to provide a good answer later than a poor answer today. And so with that, I will hand it over to Shannon.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's exciting for me to get the opportunity to come before you and to share some of the stories and the work that's happening in our schools on a daily basis. I am excited to be a spokesperson for that work. The real people that are making miracles happen on a daily basis are our educators in their classrooms, as well as our therapists, our families, and most importantly, our students. And I think that is hopefully something that will come through in this conversation today, is just how important it is that we are working with our students as partners as we launch into the world of secondary special education, because their voice is the most important one at the table. And so we'll go ahead and get started. I have a couple of things that I want to make sure to touch upon tonight. I think it's helpful to provide some context and some framing as we talk about our inclusion work. And so with that, I'd like to share a couple of data points around the demographics of some of the students in our school district receiving special ed services. I'd like to share with you some of the findings from our listening sessions that happened last year at the elementary level, and to talk about how we are responding to that staff and leadership and parent feedback. It's really informed our planning for growing inclusion at the secondary level, so I think it's important that we share some of those points with you. We'll talk about that significant shift that happens as we transition students up from the elementary to the middle school level, middle school to high school, and then high school to transition. We'll talk some of the data points in secondary special education. And with that, I'll provide you with a very brief overview of our post-secondary data for students with disabilities. And then finally, we'll share some of the work and some of the success we've seen as we launch into increasing inclusion at the secondary level. So there was a question around what exactly is inclusion? Is there a shared definition of inclusion? And I think it's very important that we frame inclusion as a belief and a value, as Dr. Holman shared. Inclusion is much bigger than special education or people with disabilities. It relates to all classes of students and staff. And it is a tremendous goal as well as active work. And so what we like to do is frame inclusion in terms of values and beliefs. And so we see disability as diversity amongst our student population and amongst our staff population. 1 in 5 people has a disability, and that adds to the context of the world around us. We recognize that belonging is ultimately a fundamental human need, and that is part of what has driven our work of inclusionary practices. Every child needs to be valued because of strengths, gifts, and challenges. Every of those piece of that makes them unique. And ultimately, it's not our job to fix, quote unquote, fix disability. There's nothing inherently wrong with disability. We value children as they come to us, and we celebrate what people bring to the table. And ultimately, everyone benefits from learning in a space that is diverse and designed to meet the instructional needs of all kinds of students. A class that is able to speak to the needs of kids with disabilities is going to more than adequately serve kids that are highly capable, students who are multilingual, students who are coming to us from other countries, a wide variety of student needs. Dr. Holman touched on this briefly, but I think it's always helpful to provide a little bit of vocabulary when we start talking about special education. We have a tendency in my world to talk in acronyms and different substitutions, and so I'm going to try and be clear so we have common language. But LRE, as Dr. Holman mentioned, is about ensuring that students receive their special ed services in general education classes to the greatest extent possible, unless the nature and severity of their disability means that education in gen ed, even with supplemental aids and services, can't be achieved successfully. Ultimately, a child's placement services program, that is all made at the IEP table with family, students, staff, and people who are involved in that child's life and in their program. That's where those decisions happen. Ultimately, we look at a continuum of placements for students, and it's not a straight continuum. If I had better graphic skills, it would show arrows intertwining around this, because ultimately it's about ensuring flexibility and being able to serve students in the best way possible. And here's the irony around our inclusionary practice work and talking about launching at secondary. Our secondary schools actually have been inclusive, and they have offered more inclusive opportunities than elementary schools have historically for quite a while. All of our children go to their neighborhood high schools with only a small number of exceptions, unlike our elementary schools that had children segregated into separate schools. And so our secondary staff and leaders have been doing really remarkable work for the past few years. And so what we'll talk about is how they're growing and expanding inclusionary practices that is already somewhat present in their schools. I do think it's important that we consider the polarity between the fact that in special education, everything is focused on an individual child. It is very specific to that child. It's very specific to their strengths and needs, their goals, their team's input and participation. Every decision, like I shared, is made at the IEP table. And so that has to be held as a standard and a fundamental principle. And it's also important that we're considering inclusionary practices and structures and systems that we want to see across the district. And so there are times in which there can be a sense of conflict between a child's individual needs or inclusionary practices. And what I always remind people is that both are true and both are valued, and that we can have both in ensuring high quality educational outcomes for kids with disabilities. This is a graphic just to remind people of the science behind implementation. Anytime that you are implementing something new or different across a very large, complex, multi-nuanced organization such as Lake Washington School District, you're going to be going through multiple stages of what we know happens in implementation science. Stage 1 is all about engaging and exploring the work, and we spent about 3 years in that process here before we launched into stage 2, which is really around planning and preparing. And when you start getting into the more detailed work and around building readiness. And I would say that we are still in that stage and dipping our toes into stage 3 around initiation and refinement. Inclusion is going to be very much a learning process. One of the things that I said from the very beginning of our inclusion journey was the only way to learn how to engage in inclusive practices is to actually have your students with complex learning needs at your school. You can't just learn in isolation in a vacuum how to work with kids with disabilities. You learn by working with those children, by establishing relationship with those children. And so when we started shifting students back into their neighborhood schools, it was with the idea and understanding that we are learning how to do this work with these students. They're walking beside us as we do this, and that it's not something that we would present as a fait accompli. It is something that is very much organic, and that means we have steps forward and we have steps backward as we learn and grow. Ultimately, our goal is to maintain and sustain and scale up as we start shifting towards more inclusive practices at secondary, but more refinement and more specialization in our inclusive practice. And so we may have been doing work around universal design, but now it's time for us to grow and expand and talk about peer-mediated strategies and inclusive IEPs and things along those lines that really help us grow and expand our practice as we move forward. This is a graphic that I think is helpful in the sense of sharing with you some of our demographics and to provide a little bit of additional context. So this is a representation of students that we define as having complex learning needs. And we have a very simple, fairly straightforward definition of that. It is something that we simply utilize internally as we talk about the intensity of program needs and the supports and staffing necessary to meet the needs of students. We define these as children that have intellectual disabilities or children that have autism, and addition to that, significant delays in adaptive skills. So we know that those are children that are going to need a very high level of support. They're students that were traditionally placed in self-contained learning centers and transition programs. And so it's important that we are watching and following these students as they progress in our system. What I have on the left-hand side of elementary and secondary is a comparison of the growth that's happened over the past couple of years. You'll see that we have seen a skyrocketing growth in our elementary students with more significant complex learning needs. And we theorize there's a variety of reasons why. I think word has gotten out that this is a focus and a value and a belief in Lake Washington, and that brings people to us. I also believe that there is something to be said about changes in just district demographics and populations of families that come here for technology jobs or industry, and they come here specifically to receive high-quality special ed services. The second part of the graphic demonstrates the complex learning needs just in comparison to our special ed enrollment. And so the bottom line shows you that our special ed enrollment, or the percentage of kids in our district that are identified to receive special ed services, has stayed relatively flat, relatively stable, currently hovering around 9.6% of our students identified in special education. However, when you look at the percentage of students with complex learning needs, you see a very different trajectory. So in summary, what that means is that we have the same number of kids receiving special ed services, if not slightly less, but their needs are much more complex and much more significant. And I think it's important to have that framing when we talk about inclusive practices, because we are programming for children with a wide variety of both academic as well as social emotional needs. I also think it helps if we look at the demographics of our children with disabilities. And so this is a data platform that was provided this year by OSPI on Tableau under the EDS program. And what it does is it shows you the percentage of students that are identified under different disability categories. There are 14 different disability categories recognized by the state and the feds around eligibility. So categories like autism, children with vision impairments, children with learning disabilities, children with health impairments. And what I have drawn an arrow to are the children that have been identified under the category of autism. It's also, I think, helpful to note that this does not reflect every child that has autism in Lake Washington. It's the children with autism who have it already diagnosed and have been identified for special ed. But more than 1 in 4 of our children in special education has a diagnosis of autism. And that is significantly discrepant than the state average. At the state level, it is a much smaller rate of only 13% of students being identified as having that category of eligibility, whereas for us, we're upwards of 27% roughly of our student population being identified for autism. And so, again, a reflection of the complexity of needs of the students that we're serving and we're supporting. Additional context is Lake Washington is a very international community. And so with that, we also look at disability category broken up by either students that are multilingual or non-multilingual. So I draw your attention to the far left column, which is the autism category again. The orange are students that are multilingual learners, and the blue are students that are non-multilingual learners. If you can take a peek at that, about a third of our children that are multilingual are also identified under the category of autism. So if you can imagine the complexity of programming and supporting a child on the autism spectrum, but then you add in the additional asset of being multilingual, that requires unique considerations for them. We see that same level of discrepancy in developmental delays. If you were to take a tour of our early childhood programs, you would be amazed at the percentage of students that are coming to us from other countries who are multilingual and have a diagnosis of autism. You can also see some of our disproportionate numbers under the categories of health impairment and under the category of specific learning disabilities, and I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment.
Shannon, I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
clarify. The 27% for multilingual students qualifying as autistic, that is 27% of all qualified
Yes.
multilingual students have a qualifying category of
Yes.
autism.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, in special education.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So we do have disproportionality in our district, and disproportionality basically is telling us that your numbers are not in alignment with one another. So you should have a comparable percentage of your children in special education, no matter what racial group or ethnicity group you're identifying with. You should have a relatively comparable chance of being identified with a disability. Disability crosses all ethnicities, all people's employment and their finances, everything. And so unique to Lake Washington, we do show disproportionality for white students. And that is under the category of health impaired, meaning we over-identify white students as having health impairments in comparison to all of our other student groups, which is an interesting piece of information. Lots of reasons why we could spend a whole session talking about disproportionality. We also see it under the category of having a specific learning disability. We over-identify our Hispanic and Latino students as having learning disabilities, as well as our Black and African American students as having learning disabilities. And so that is work that our district has undertaken before, and we showed and demonstrated growth, and we still continue to struggle with it and have challenges. And so it's work that we're actually discussing soon again in our instructional leadership team, and work that is a multi-department effort with equity, student services, because we look at discipline as well as district leaders and building leaders.
Shannon, Lisa has a question.
Can you clarify what other health impairment and specific learning disability refers to?
So those are categories of eligibility as identifying students for special education services. So when we evaluate a child for special education, we have to determine if they meet qualification standards, and the state defines 14 disability categories and the requirements to be eligible under those categories. So for example, in our state, to have a learning disability, you have to demonstrate a significant discrepancy between your cognitive performance on an IQ test and your academic achievement performance on an academic assessment. If that gap is large enough, it qualifies you as having a specific learning disability. For health impairment, it is a medical diagnosis that states that you have a disability related to your health condition that is significantly impacting your learning. So different categories have different requirements. And the learning disability category is about to undertake a monumental shift in a very good way in the next couple of years, which I'm excited about.
Thank
Yeah.
Could you clarify what the risk ratio is, or what that number represents or means?
Yeah, so the risk ratio basically states if you look at Hispanic, Latino students, that 4.03 ratio means that you are 4 times as likely, if you are Hispanic or Latino, to be identified as having a learning disability than a student who is not. So you want your risk ratio to be under 2. And when it starts creeping up higher than that, that means that you are identifying more children that are Hispanic, Latino for special education than any other group, meaning there is something that needs to be addressed in your practices. Yeah.
I was wondering, are we having any problems under-identifying any group of students, or is it just we're over-identifying?
So the federal government does not require school districts to address or work towards under-identification. However, internally in our district, it is an issue and a challenge, and equity-wise, it is a significant issue. So, for example, historically, when you look at Black students in the category of autism, the age of diagnosis of autism for white students has historically been between 2 and 3 years of age. And for Black students, historically, it's been between the years of 6 or 7 years old. That is an equity issue. That is an access to health care. That is implicit bias. That is perceiving student behavior in a different way because of the color of a child's skin. So that is work that we definitely consider and we look at internally, but we don't report on it. There's not a process of accountability at the federal or state level for that. There should be. Yeah.
Well, looking at like the Asian for indicator 10, since it's 0.1, does that mean if you're Asian, you're 10 times less likely to be identified for a specific learning disability?
It means that, yes, our number of students identified as having a learning disability under that category of Asian is pretty low in comparison to what we would expect. However, we also have to be thoughtful about cultural beliefs around disability and views towards those considerations. And there are times in which we have families that do not want to consent to special ed evaluation, or they don't want to consent to special ed services, or there is stigma around disability in their culture or in their native country. So there's a wide variety of considerations at play in that work. Yeah. Or when we start talking about, for example, our disproportionality for Hispanic and Latino families, this is work I have been navigating for many years now, and there are a variety of root causes for that disproportionality, everything from our assessment practices to pre-referral and intervention practices. But the area that I'm really targeting as we look ahead towards a plan of improvement in that area is parent education and empowerment. And so we are doing 2 listening sessions with the equity department of our Hispanic and Latino families that have children identified for special education to really hear about their journeys in the referral and evaluation process. Because in my opinion, in my own personal opinion, and I'm making an assumption, it's why we're doing the listening sessions, is that a lot of those families have historically not pushed back on school teams. They have historically not said that they want the school team to try other or more things before they head down the route of special education. And so one of the things we want to do is interrogate that assumption and see what those families say, because if that is an issue, then parent education and empowerment is going to go a long way towards addressing the problem. So. Like I said, disproportionality is a whole other study session probably if we wanted to dive into it. I also like to liken disproportionality issues to how coaches talk to kids after a rough soccer game. And you know how the goalie oftentimes walks away with their head hanging down because someone scored on them? And the coach always said, you got to remember that goal, that ball got past 20 other players. I clearly don't know soccer, but got past, 10 other players before it got to you. And so that is not your failure, it's a failure of the system and the team. Disproportionality is a failure of the system and all of us. And so it's work that has to be addressed within special education, but more importantly, within general education and our referral and our assessment practices. Okay, so there have been questions around, well, how do you measure your growth and progress on inclusionary practices? How do you know if you're going in the right direction? How do you know if you're seeing good outcomes? And what I've shared with you here are some of the metrics that we would consider as part of the story of our inclusionary practice. And I would draw your attention to the fact that this is going to include multiple types of data. It is quantitative data, and it's qualitative data, and it's observation, and it is leading and lagging indicators around student performance and achievement. There's a lot that plays into inclusionary practice, and so the metrics are just as complex. One thing we look at is the percentage of children spending the majority of their time in general education. That's one thing that we look at, which is our LRE data. You get a number of reports on the different OEs in your R1, 2, and 3 reports that look at just general student achievement data on state assessments, on FastBridge assessments, on panorama evaluations. All of those are data points that can be considered as part of our inclusion work. We have certain measures that we utilize when we go in and do classroom observations. There's a measure called the APERS that we utilize to look to see if we can observe all the important components of a classroom program that we know will lead to more learning and success for students. Things like visuals for students, and things like having a schedule for students, and having small learning groups available for them. We look at children's IEP programming and goals in terms of their yearly and quarterly progress, but also how they do in terms of their post-secondary outcomes and their graduation data. We look at family and community engagement and how parents are feeling about practice, how kids are feeling about practice, as well as feedback and expansion around professional learning and teacher collaboration opportunities, looking at school schedules. Matt sat down and analyzed Juanita High School's schedule around co-teaching, and there were tremendous data points across that are informing how we're making progress, as well as just in general the equity and access pieces of whether or not our students are accessing different classrooms and different learning opportunities and social activities, and how their peers are responding. And it's not just about measuring how students with disabilities are performing and how they're measuring on these different indicators, but how are children in general education benefiting from this work as well. This is data that is something that I feel tremendous pride in the effort of our cabinet, our district leaders, and our school staff. This is data that reflects the percentage of children and their time in general education. The light blue reflects the percentage of children that spend 80 to 100% of their day in general education. The dark blue represents this percentage of students that spend what we call 40 to 79% of their time in general education. So they are basically kind of in a half and half service model, half-time in general ed, half-time in special ed. And then the orange are children who are, in essence, in a self-contained type of program or service model, meaning they spend 80 to 100% of their day within a special education learning space. And so what you can see is that we have dropped that most restrictive LRE substantially over the past few years. And what's even more exciting about that is it has not resulted in a bubble of students moving into the second tier of services where they're in 40 to 79%, so they've just made a small bump up. It's actually, you can see our 80 to 100% of the time in gen ed has grown comparably to the decrease in the 0 to 39%, meaning that kids are truly moving up, if not 1, 2 steps forward up into their time in the general education learning space. So that's exciting data, and data actually that's been recognized at the state level as well. So we did, oh, sorry, go ahead.
A quick question.
Yeah.
When we're looking at LRE and the percentage of the day, are we looking at classroom only, or are we looking at, I go back to an IEP in which they told us that my son was 60% or 80% included because they included the lunchroom, they included passing between. So are we talking about just classroom time, or what are we going after?
We're talking about instructional time and passing period time, not lunch.
Thank you.
And so that is a part of that picture. Okay, so in terms of our inclusion journey, one of the things that we did spend some time doing is having listening sessions. Last year, we brought Paul Vine back, our former director of special education, and he went to each and every one of our elementary schools and met with staff, observed students, met with building leaders. And those listening sessions were very informative in terms of our initial kind of implementation and also how we can build upon what we learned. And so what we saw are some really strong initial signs of success with this new practice of inclusionary practice. What we saw was we really had hit the mark on shifting adult beliefs around inclusionary practices. A lot of staff and leaders said, okay, we get it. Inclusion is important. It shows tremendous benefit. This is work we're going to do, and it's important. Now, how do we do it, right? So that was the next question. But the belief, and that's probably one of the biggest barriers to work through, was there. The number of stories that we heard about positive student interactions on the playground, in the classroom, kids that didn't necessarily take on a caretaking role, but took on a partner role and really were supportive of having kids with a wide variety of needs in their classrooms. And then also some neat family engagement learning opportunities. There were a handful of our schools that invited parents in and did listening sessions with them about what was working and what wasn't working, and that was really something families appreciated and valued. Some of the things that we saw as characteristics of the schools that were being most successful with inclusionary practices was really strong, intentional principal leadership. When a principal believes in inclusive practices, and that is a standard that they hold, and it is incorporated into staff meetings, evaluations, all of the work that they're doing, it made a huge difference. We also saw the power of staff leadership. Those that were willing to really speak positively to inclusive practices, to speak about how important this was, perhaps for their own children or for them as individuals as well. But that really led to more successful implementation, as well as when teachers had the opportunity for really thoughtful, intentional collaboration, and also opportunities to engage in professional learning and practice. We also obviously heard challenges in this work. I mean, last year I think was a year that was challenging for our students and our staff for a wide variety of reasons. There were a number of shifts and changes that happened across the entire system, and inclusion was one of those shifts. And so there was feedback that I think really spoke to staff emotional health and well-being, that spoke to educator burnout and the fact that folks oftentimes felt overwhelmed or fearful in being asked to do something new. Teachers oftentimes are their own worst critics. They're type A, they really want to do the very best they can for students, and when they're learning, they're asked to be vulnerable and make mistakes, and that is hard sometimes for teachers and for therapists and for leaders as well. And so that piece was definitely part of it. There was occasionally confusion and wondering around, is inclusion full-time general ed, or is it that students have the opportunity to increase time in general ed, and what about these kinds of students? So there were service model questions and wonderings, and teachers that had traditionally always taught self-contained programs being asked to teach a greater variety of students, and that was also learning for a lot of our staff. Looking at a complex school district of multiple schools and leaders and systems, communication is an ongoing challenge, an ongoing challenge with parents and students themselves. And so we always have room for growth and improvement in that area. We heard a desire for more professional learning, and that is something that we continue to hear and that we have responded to significantly this past year. A lot of issues around student behavior, and I would say that not all of it is related to kids with disabilities or kids in special education. However, it tends to get kind of lumped together in the sense that we are seeing a shift in how kids are coming to us in kindergarten and their school readiness and their ability to regulate their emotions and attend for periods of time. A lot of our staff read the book The Anxious Generation that talked about screen time and how that has impacted the attention span and the ability for students to be independent in their early learning years. And so all of those pieces played into it, as well as just the complication and desire for more collaboration time. There's never enough time in the day to get everything done that folks want, and so a desire to have that collaborative time work. And actually, one of the benefits of our most recent contract with our partners at LWEA was putting some very clear guidelines and expectations around master schedules and ensuring that staff have collaboration time and that they have the opportunity to work together. But that is new for some of our staff. Some of our special ed staff were used to working just in their own learning spaces and doing minimal collaboration with peers, and that is a shift in practice for them. And so learning how to do that collaboration was part of the learning process for lots of folks. Yeah.
And, one of the things was noted the other night at the town hall meeting, and I heard it a number of times before too, that most teachers or most graduates coming out of college education had virtually no special ed classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, you know, they're thrust into their first job right out of school, which is difficult enough. But now they're expected to teach a group of kids that they haven't had before,
Mm-hmm.
or they haven't had an introduction to, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
unless they have a family member.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing? You mentioned the professional learning. I'm glad that we're here, what we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Are we doing something special for our incoming first-time teachers?
That's a very good question. Yes, we are. Inclusionary practice has become part of our EIA prior to school training for new staff. And so we presented to new staff, and that was part of the conversation and work that they heard from us. It's also something our new principals are hearing about from us during our August DLT week in training. And our equity department are very much partners with us in helping expand people's knowledge and understanding around working with people with disabilities. It's wonderful because one of our equity facilitators actually sits on the board of the ARC, and so has a particular skill set and knowledge base around people with disabilities, and oftentimes comes and partners with families, and that's super helpful. So yes, and if you think about a new teacher, they are learning so much in such a short period of time, right? They have curriculum. This year we introduced cumulative. They have to figure out, different learning platforms. Just where's their classroom and their materials? Like, a new teacher has a pretty intense learning curve, and inclusion is part of it, and we frame it that way. But it also is part of a melody of supports and programming they have to learn that first couple of weeks. Yeah. So in our inclusion journey, here are some of the things that we have done in response to the listening session feedback, to parent feedback, to building leader feedback. Cabinet was generous in allocating additional classified staffing for us this year. That has made a huge difference in our ability to support students. I'm looking forward to advocating with the legislature who have the mistaken belief that inclusion doesn't cost more. It absolutely costs more when you're going to do it right. And when you have a high number of kids that have really unique needs. And so Cabinet supported us with additional staffing. We also had to provide clarity around staffing models to help folks understand the level of flexibility they have, and also the staffing supports they have in terms of paraeducators help, as well as special educators help. We also did some unique problem solving. So there were a couple of our programs with really significantly high numbers of students at the high school level that needed support with toileting and changing and all of those more personal needs. And so we've brought in a couple of CNAs actually to help with that load, to free our teachers and paraeducators to do more instructional work. So trying to think creatively around some of those needs that we have. We've done some parent education and engagement opportunities. We did a Welcome to Lake Washington. Let's dive into Special Education 101 with our Special Education PTA. It was our biggest turnout I've seen in a long time. It was awesome. A lot of conversation about inclusion and what is special ed and what is Section 504 and some of those pieces, as well as working with some of our parent partners in different organizations. Something I'm really looking forward to this year is we're bringing in a guest speaker, Mr. Brett Neeson, who is the education lead at Children's Hospital. He's a public health professor at the University of Washington as well. He's coming in, he did an amazing blog post on understanding sexual health and development and supports and privacy needs and security and safety needs for people with young people with disabilities. And he's coming to present to families in March, as well as we're having him present to all of our staff as well. And so some of that education engagement piece has been really powerful. A lot of conversations with our secondary leaders. What is it that you need to successfully increase inclusionary practice, and listening to them and their stories, as well as hearing directly from students themselves. Students have very strong opinions about what they need in high school around special ed services and supports. And sometimes their needs and interests differ from their parents' interests or from our interests. And it's important that we give voice to it and value to it, because they're the ones who really need to speak to that. We've done some work developing and training our MTSS coaches. There is a subgroup in the MTS coaches who are special educators, and they are tapped to train other MTSS coaches around special education issues, and so we meet with them monthly to do some deep dive learning with them. And then most importantly is we really believe on boots on the ground in your classroom, in your building, training and coaching, as that really is what we know changes adult behavior. And so our SPED directors and our program specialists and our para support staff, they are in the buildings on a daily and weekly basis, walking alongside teachers and principals and actively problem solving and bouncing ideas off one another and growing and developing practice.
I know that the pool of recruits for paraeducators is small, and it has not increased that greatly. Have we been able to increase our para staff, I don't want to say substantially, but increase it as we've gone into inclusionary practices?
Yes, our classified staffing has increased significantly over the past 5 years,
Okay.
and again took another leap forward this year, and so that is something I'm appreciative of. We also do a tremendous amount of work with high-cost safety net submissions to request some level of reimbursement, not all, but some level, from the state for students that have one-to-one paraeducators or contractual support staff. HR has been working on this issue throughout the course of this year in terms of looking at their practices, like, for example, helping support those that need to have the assessment to be qualified to be a paraeducator, or in translating transcripts, which comes at pretty significant cost, and it's awfully hard to say to someone, well, if you get your transcript transcribed for us, then we can hire you, if they are looking for a job and they don't have a tremendous amount of income. So in us being able to offer the transcription service, that then increases our pool as well. So those are just some of the efforts. They could probably respond in more detail.
But we've gone from X number to Y number.
Yeah, we actually have that data somewhere. I don't have it in
Okay,
front of me
that'd be great
today.
if we could.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we can follow up on the increase in staffing, but also the fill rate right now. I know in the board's HR report tonight, you'll see there's a number of different paraeducator positions that are hired. Some of those are the recent allocation that was just made, and so I know which schools. So I've actually kind of been paying attention to who's filling where, and so.
Yeah.
Well, the new program over at Lake Washington Tech for paraeducators, I believe I
Yes.
want to say fairly
Yes.
new.
We're partnering with them.
Well, I was wondering,
Yep.
how well is that working, and is it really producing for us as well as expected, or we need more?
I know that they have reached out and they have engaged with Lake Washington Tech, and I know actually some of our students have been encouraged to participate in that program. I'm not sure exactly where they're at in the process, Matt, but that would be something we can also follow up on. That is something we've been doing, is reaching out on college campuses to try and reach students that could flex their schedules. In fact, I just hired a college student in my own department who goes to school at night, and then I don't know how she has the energy, and then works with us during the day. So that's something that we look at as well. So, yeah.
The one area that I think is a really great pool, because we are unique because we're in classroom every day, and we saw a lot of the peer tutors that there were some that were naturals, and we encouraged them, if they don't have another track that they're looking at, is there a possibility of looking at that pool of kids to try and encourage the idea, if you're not going into X, Y, or Z, and you're kind of at a crossroads where you're going, to really encourage the program?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a very valuable resource and consideration, as well as in encouraging our students with disabilities to be able to apply to some of those positions in that department, but also in maintenance and in transportation, and that is something I would love to see more of hiring of our own graduates.
I just recall two students that came out of the woodwork, if you will, at the it was a crisis training class that they had over at Redmond High, CERT class, and two boys came out of the woodwork to basically buddy up with my son.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the year, one of them had signed up to become a peer tutor next year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of finding that natural niche.
Yeah.
We had a young man that I encouraged to look at it, the idea that his attendance wasn't great because he was considered a problem student. He was behavior. People pushed his buttons, he responded. But when he crossed that threshold from the hallway to the music room, that boy became a totally different student.
Mm-hmm.
And I encouraged him at the time, and I'm hoping that we have the same way, that we can have teachers noticing that, encouraging it, especially for kids that aren't doing as well in regular classroom, but yet all of a sudden they shine in those areas.
Yeah. We've also been somewhat of a victim of our own good practice, in the sense that a tremendous number of our paraeducators pursue alt routes to becoming educators. And so then we hire them as teachers, but then we've just lost a really great para. So it is a little bit of a mixed blessing, but it is ultimately a good thing in that we have people coming in that have a passion for working with students. Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to the role of paraeducators in inclusionary practices with relation to special education, and sort of related question? We were just at Lakeview on Friday and sort of stumbled into a conversation around professional development for paraeducators, and I was not aware that because they're different roles, maybe this should have been obvious as I say it out loud, but because they're different roles from a certificated teacher, there were different expectations around professional development and sort of how many hours they would spend on professional development.
Yeah.
So what is their role? Is it important for them to have training as well as our certificated educators?
Absolutely. In fact, I would say our paraeducators were the first round of staff to receive training on inclusionary practices. We purchased a series of trainings from some national experts, Julie Costin and Christy Fronczak, on inclusionary practices, and we purchased a specific suite of trainings called Parabytes. And what we have designed is, with professional learning, really have been doing remarkable work in this area. They designed a series of PLCs for paras, where they were able to participate in those online trainings and then process and collaborate and learn from one another based on that. Paras are vital to the work that we do on a daily basis in special education. We would not function without them. And as important as they are, it's also very important that they learn how to do the work right. And in inclusion, it's super important that they are facilitators, not caretakers, and that they are encouraging peer engagement instead of doing it for the child or doing it exclusively with the child. And so that is ongoing learning. We actually have 2 members of our special ed leadership team embedded in professional learning for paraeducator supports and training, and that is something they spend a lot of time really kind of helping develop and talk to paras around building that skill, and principals and understanding, and SPED teachers and understanding that's something they need to be growing and learning on. Yeah. Good question. All right. So let's talk about how we are expanding inclusion as we look towards the secondary level. It's interesting. I've been in this field for about over 30 years now, and I've worked all levels, birth to 3, all the way up now to age 22. And people will think that the most vulnerable period of development and parent engagement, involvement, and learning is in those very early birth to 5 years. And in my experience, it's just the opposite. I think that our adolescents are in some of their most vulnerable developmental periods, and our families are also at some of their most vulnerable points as well. And so secondary is really it's a remarkable time of education for kids and some of the most caring educators. I always laugh because having worked different levels, there's 2 groups of teachers that are amazing, preschool teachers and middle school teachers. The work is so hard and so crazy that you get into that field and you either spend a year and decide, not for me, or you go into that field and you stay forever. So some of our most amazing educators are at the middle school level and secondary level because they have a passion for working with kids at their most awkward period of development. I would question anyone in this room who, thinking back, thought middle school was the best time of my life. Honestly, it's like awkward is the word to be emphasized around middle school. So again, as we look at context for secondary inclusive practices, I do think it's important that we look at that unique stage of growth and development for kids, as well as some of the sources of data that we have and what that means to our practice. There's lots of feedback that was gathered from elementary staff, but we are also gathering it from secondary staff and leaders and families. And then just understanding the nature of secondary structures and systems. For first-time parents, it is daunting to start that conversation around multiple classes, multiple teachers, different expectations. And so it becomes a little bit even more complex when you have a child with a disability. And so navigating that is part of how we support inclusive practice. I wanted to share this just in general to just provide, it's the psychologist in me. I always think it helps to understand exactly where adolescents are in terms of their growth and development. This is some brain imaging taken at different ages. And what you see is this shift and deepening of the blue color as children's brains grow and develop. And that is where they're making more and more connection, and they're starting to develop their frontal lobe, which is responsible for executive functioning, decision making, emotional regulation, all of those pieces. And to give you a little bit of relief, yes, it does not resolve until their mid-20s. There's still room for growth. I can speak to that myself. And so the other thing I would draw your attention to is the red and yellow areas of that young middle school brain, and that is all in the amygdala and emotional functioning departments, meaning kids are an emotional whirlwind at that age and stage. And so that is something we have to be thoughtful about as they go through the shift to secondary. Puberty, with both physical and emotional shifts and changes, but the social dynamics of a secondary world are also a very substantial shift for students. They go from being with this peer group they've met and known since kindergarten, and all of a sudden they're encountering a wider variety of students that they have no history with and no knowledge of. And we start to see this grouping experience and this value in peer relationship happening. Kids are exploring their identities. Who am I? What is my sexuality? Who am I as a person? What are my interests? What do I want to do in school? We see expansive cognitive development, and we also note that this is a period of time in which a lot of mental health issues will show themselves for the first time in young people. So we see an uptick in diagnoses of depression, anxiety, mood disorders, things along those lines. And it's also a big shift for parents, and shifting from being the center of your child's universe to a observer on the periphery. Still very vital to that child functioning, just like a 10-month-old with stranger danger fears kind of comes near you and then explores and then comes near you and explores. Adolescents do somewhat of the same thing, where they need to know you're there, but they also need you to know that they don't really care what your opinion is at times. So it's an interesting balance that they're navigating. I was joking with Dr. Holman earlier about I have a senior in high school, and we're currently soiling the nest. That phrase, soiling the nest, we're doing that in spades. I also would draw folks' attention to the fact that those developmental shifts and changes are even more significant if you have a child with a disability. Their experience of going through puberty will often cause demands on them physically and emotionally that they are unprepared to handle. Their navigation of social dynamics, if they don't understand peer pressure, sarcasm, jokes or nonverbal cues, that social dynamic becomes much more challenging and dynamic for them. Kids with disabilities oftentimes will see an uptick in mental health issues and challenges, sensory challenges. So it is a time of vulnerability for these students. It's also a time when they start to get some spunk and start to get to know who they are, and that part is absolutely a hoot to enjoy with them. But it does also come, again, like I shared, with some challenges. And then the school systems. We're not talking about one teacher, one class, and one teacher covering all content areas. We're talking multiple classes, different class sizes, multiple teachers having different expectations, shifts in responsibility and autonomy, shifts around what you're responsible to organize or take care of yourself, your relationship with your teachers and how you're communicating with them. This desire for them to be able to organize assignments and keep track of things and all their schedule issues. Again, a reminder of that frontal lobe. It doesn't come naturally to them at this age. That push-pull between independence and autonomy and fear of being independent and autonomous. The learning environment shifts. It's a lot more fast-paced, a lot more transitions that they're navigating. They're learning about how do I handle sports, cut sports, and disappointment around making teams, and how do I handle clubs where I may or not be feeling welcome, or extracurriculars. And then parents have this big shift in school communication. They're used to having one general education teacher and one special education teacher that they could email and get a response from relatively quickly. And at the secondary level, you're navigating multiple teachers, general ed, specialists, and they are serving hundreds of students. And so their ability to be responsive like an elementary staff member might be shifts and changes. And so at a time when you're feeling anxious about your child's transition, you're also getting some lesser communication, and that can be a hard point for people to navigate. And we also open the world of transition planning for students as part of their IEPs. How do we support kids as they make these leaps from level to level, and support families as well? Well, the first thing that happens is the IEP brings on a new part of it, a new component called the transition plan. And that's when we start having conversations with students about what are your strengths, what are your interests, what are your preferences. You think you want to be someone who works outside and does like forestry service, and that sounds like something that's interesting to you, it's a preference, but then have you actually tried going out and logging and cutting down things and moving pounds of dirt? You may not then be as interested in it, right? So helping them understand that piece, writing goals for them for life beyond high school. What are you going to do for your post-secondary education? What are you going to do for employment? How are you going to be living your level of independence in the community? We're also identifying transition services and making connections. This is when the community is a vital part of this process. How are we connecting you with state agencies as well as other employment opportunities, internship opportunities, as well as special ed services? We write your course of study, meaning we basically kind of start to plan out your high school career. We write goals to help you achieve positive outcomes at life beyond high school. And again, it becomes a larger team when we start inviting in adult agencies like DDA, DVR, again, I'm talking in acronyms, but the agencies that are there to support you as you move into independence and adulthood. So that's one big piece. We actually do a lot more thoughtful planning around transitions for our kids with disabilities than we do for our kids without. In terms of promotion, there is very much a consideration around individual students and their needs, and then systemic needs that we know exist across schools and levels. Every spring, there is a transition promotion event that is set up in district where we spend a day and school teams are communicating with one another about students that are moving up. So it is elementary coming in to talk to their middle school counterparts, and then our middle school counterparts then turning around and talking to their high school counterparts, and then again, high school talking to Transition Academy staff. And that is an opportunity to share IEPs, evaluation reports, progress notes, feedback from staff and families, therapist notes, paperwork transitions, as well as that qualitative conversation about students that happens. A lot of times we need to do IEP meetings as we shift schedules and time as kids are moving into secondary, and they have to kind of fit into that course box schedule, not just being all day in one classroom. A lot of times individual students need something more intensive. They might need social studies or visuals or organizational tools or peer supports, or we take them on personal tours of schools. Every child is different, and so we seek to target that, and we also seek to communicate those supports to the next level and also provide them with those supports so that a child sees something familiar when they go into their next grade level. Obviously, fifth grade teachers are working on skill development. That's always the biggest boost around promotion. And then a number of our schools offer unique orientation events and onboarding for kids that help get them more comfortable with moving into middle and high school.
I had a question a couple slides back.
Mhm.
So you've gone over like how they're supported within the school day, but I do think like as students move up to more secondary education, a larger part of their life becomes like the clubs and extracurriculars that you were talking about, but we can't exactly have like teachers stay past school hours or like force them to do that. But how do we, and then also in like high school especially, a lot of these clubs are ran by students who aren't necessarily, you know, in any way trained to handle like a difference of needs among club members. So how are special education students supported in after school activities, and like how do we promote inclusivity in that when we don't have, you know, staffing necessarily?
So I'm going to share two things with you. I'll share one now, and I'm going to share another one in a little bit, another slide. But when it comes to the supports a child needs, one of the things that we have done is sought to educate staff and IEP teams and building leaders that the supports that are present on a child's IEP can also be accessed for extracurricular activities. So say, for example, a child requires paraeducator support to be successful at school in their learning. That paraeducator support is available and can be provided to them in an after-school or extracurricular activity. If a child requires the supports of a one-to-one nurse for medical reasons, and they're in before-school care, we will provide that one-to-one nurse so they're able to access that. There is a piece, I think, what you're discussing around student education, around supporting their peers, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit, I promise. Good question.
You spoke to some of the differences in secondary, for example, the increased expectations around executive functioning skills.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see situations where students are coming out of elementary and they've been doing great in elementary, especially since they may have been there since kindergarten, 6 years, all the staff knows them really well, and all of a sudden they're moving into this new environment, and so there might be supports that weren't needed in 5th grade that are suddenly needed in 6th grade. Where and how does that shake out?
So again, you have to tease out how that context that they're navigating is impacting things, so you're able to target the right supports for their needs. And then one of the things that will sometimes happen is a shift in the accommodations and modifications part of a child's IEP, where we need to get more specific around what accommodations in the secondary environment are going to benefit this child, and what modifications may we need to make in terms of their instruction and content such that they're able to be successful in their classes. So that's a piece of it. Oftentimes, reevaluations will occur around that shift in time as well. And so a lot of times there are assessments that happen around executive functioning skills, and sometimes we add goals in those areas. Although I always ask teams to be thoughtful that we're not expecting more of a child with a disability than we would a typical student. Because executive functioning, I'm still waiting for my youngest to figure it out. So that is, again, a natural part of that developmental period, right? Yeah.
I was going to say, as a former middle school teacher, that you described most of my students.
Yeah. Some pick it up faster than
And
others.
Shannon, don't
Yeah.
you think it's also, one of the unique challenges is an elementary team is putting together the best IEP they can as they're projecting what middle school is like, even
Yeah.
though they may have not stepped foot in a middle school
Yeah.
for a number of years. And even if they've gone and visited their peers at the middle school, it still doesn't kind of give them
Yeah.
the day-to-day experience of what students. And so there are many times where a student arrives with all of the supports in place, best intentions, everybody's involved, and still the IEP isn't adequate because of the context. And that's why that,
Plus, you don't know how they're going to show up in that new space, right? So, like, a good example is like when I shifted into this position, I had been in an administrative role, very skillful, very capable, come into a new position, and then all of a sudden you look like you don't know what you're doing. Like, it's a part of learning a new space and a new environment, right? And so then having to be able to support them as they are in that new learning opportunity space for them, yeah. Okay, I am running so far behind.
Are we
My
getting
apologies.
more acceptance from the administrators of having the special needs students in, well, it should be a no-brainer, homeroom? Because that environment, less structure, and it's a way for a lot of students really to have more of an interaction. And not only that, to be quite frank, when my son was in school, if you wanted to sign up to be in the class picture as a senior, it was done through homeroom. If you weren't in a homeroom, you weren't in that picture.
Yeah. No, I would say that is something that we have seen, that belief piece and understanding piece has grown significantly in our work. Now, that also comes into play a child's preference and interests, because there are some students that would like to receive their SDI during that period of time because they don't want to look different than their peers in another class. And so you also are navigating that student need as well, and their voice is the part of the process. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move a little quicker here because I'm taking up too much time. One of the things I think is helpful to understand is the current model of how we support children with special needs at the high school and middle school level. We focus in on co-teaching alongside co-planning. That is fundamentally one of our biggest leverage points for inclusionary practices to support our students. We do provide push-in supports in some circumstances, and then there are oftentimes classes that are specifically taught in content areas for kids with special education needs. That is decreasing the number of special education English classes, special education math classes. In general, across our system, those are decreasing, but we also are hearing some pushback from students and families that want those classes. And so again, it's a nuanced, complex conversation that we navigate. We have students that receive some of their instruction in transition classes, kids that have daily living skills, life skills, adaptive skills that need to learn some of those more fundamental things, oftentimes is done in our transition center classrooms. We also have a variety of different sports and activity supports available I spoke about. And one of the things I also try and draw to people's attention and do parent education about is at the secondary level, we introduce the term case manager. Sometimes you'll hear it at elementary, but fundamentally we hear it a lot at secondary. And that's because your child has shifted from having that special ed teacher and gen ed teacher to having multiple teachers and specialists that they're working with. And it's important to note they may work with different special education teachers in the course of their day. And so one of the things that is important is your child is assigned a case manager who's ultimately the one responsible to progress monitor and write the IEP and be the lead in your child's program and services. But that doesn't necessarily equate to that's their primary teacher. So for example, you will sometimes hear a parent become concerned because they have heard that the transition center teacher is the one that has reached out to talk to them about being their child's case manager. And they assume that that means that their child will be in a transition center all day. And actually, it's not the case. The transition teacher is going to be the case manager because they have a smaller class load size that they're supporting, but your child is going to likely be taking gen ed classes. They're likely might take a class from a traditional, what we would call resource teacher. They're going to take classes from a wide variety of people, but the case manager is the one who's helping support their actual IEP and programming and ensuring that it happens.
This may be another question that sounds ridiculous, but as Dr. Holman set us up, we expect all students to be working towards the results that the board has defined in results 2, so math,
Yes.
And English and so on. Do these classes for all students cover those areas? In other words, I sort of had the mental model that so some students might be in a co-taught math class, other students might be in a resource math class, other students might be in a transition math class. But it sounds like transition is actually different from what I was thinking, and is not math, but is more focused on functional skills. Are those students still getting math in a different way?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess.
They are
do all students
all
participate in math?
That's a great question. Yes, they do. They are all taking core content classes, and they are all in alignment with the standards. Now, their access points are probably going to be significantly different. And so, for example, we have a curriculum that we utilize for our students that have more significant complex learning needs. That is unique learning systems. It's aligned to all of the Common Core standards, but it provides access points at a child's skill set and level. It's aligned with the WA-AIM assessment more than the SBA assessment. One of the reasons we love co-teaching is because it's taught by a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher, but it is considered a general education class. And as such, they are working on the standards of that class and the core content of that class, but they may have accommodations and modifications. If a child is accessing, say, for example, a special ed reading class, then that class is, again, working towards the Common Core standards, but at different access points. So it is all aligned to standards. The expectation is that our goal is to get all of our children meeting grad standards, and it's just a matter of where they're entering into that process. Yeah.
So just to clarify too, like the board has a policy or an expectation around all students taking Algebra 1. And when we say all students take Algebra 1, we do mean all students, not all except for these. Students may be working on different standards within that class, if I'm hearing you right, or different, progressing
Right.
towards different standards there, but they're in Algebra 1, they're not accessing that in some other way.
Not necessarily. And so while that is a value that all children are in Algebra 1, we also have to recognize that for some students that's not appropriate as we look at their program needs and their IEPs. And so for those students, they may be working on fundamental skills that are algebraic in nature, that are building blocks of algebra, but it's not technically an algebraic class where they're working on a typical scope and sequence. And so, and there are times in which our students need to access learning to kind of develop algebra readiness for them. Algebra requires a certain level of intellectual functioning, and so we need to be able to break it down into building blocks for students. And so in those cases, students will be in a math class, or a modified algebra class, or a transition center math class that is utilizing an alternative curriculum. Yeah, it's a range depending on a child's need. Yeah, yeah, okay. Just some general information about co-teaching. I shared this briefly, but it is taught by a special ed teacher and a general ed teacher in partnership. But it's considered a general education class and is working on the content of that class. There are different models for co-teaching that can be implemented. All are effective and all are valid choices. Generally, the class size is smaller, and there is a certain percentage of kids with special education needs versus kids without special education needs. We try to find a good balance in those classes. One of the fundamentals of co-teaching, though, is teacher relationship. And so co-teaching is a difficult thing to mandate because you really need to have teachers that trust one another and have a relationship in order for them to be successful co-teachers. And so when we start training staff on co-teaching, we begin with what we call co-teaching marriage counseling. Because teachers are used to running their rooms a certain way. And when you're sharing with another teacher, you can come into conflict. So just like you got to figure out if you want to have kids in marriage, you got to figure out if you're going to assign types of homework and tests if a co-teaching relationship you're in. And so that is something that's a part of it as well. These are just some quick data slides on our...
Shannon,
Yeah.
So we have about 7 minutes.
Yep. So I can
Well,
skip
I would
parts.
I would pick and choose what you
Okay.
want to make sure you highlight,
I will.
and
Hopefully I pick right. I draw your attention to grad pathways. The image on the right, on the left, is children that have taken a grad pathway and are qualified to graduate based upon their performance on the ELA, English SBA assessment, the state assessment. And the orange are children that are not in special ed. The blue are children in special ed. It's important to see that more than 50% of our children in special ed are using the ELA SBA as a way of meeting a grad pathway, but it is substantially discrepant for kids not in special ed. The CTE pathways, on the other hand, you will see a very large number of our kids with special education needs accessing a CTE pathway for graduation. That is a mixed blessing because it's exciting that we have that opportunity for students, and a lot of them are very successful in their CTE pathways, and that is a very appropriate, valid choice to meet grad standards. And we also need to work to ensure that kids have every choice available to them. And so the more grad pathways we can give them, the better. And also the more time and attention and care we can give to supporting our CTE teachers is also going to reap a lot of benefits for us. There was a question around sports and extracurricular activities. You have this data already that shows there is some discrepancy between kids in special education and students in not in special education in terms of high school athletics. But I would say you have to take that with a grain of salt because a lot of students are involved in community clubs and activities and sports, swimming, lacrosse, crew, fencing, gymnastics. Those are not in-district sports, but students are accessing them in the community. I also would draw your attention to the significant increase that we've seen in both unified teams and schools. A unified school is a school that is putting forth a collaborative effort district school-wide around changing the culture of their school to become more inclusive. Juanita High School has started down that journey, which we're really excited about. And we have sports happening at all of our comprehensive high schools and a club happening at another high school. So room for growth, but I am thrilled to see the progress.
I'll be quick since
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of time. But when I was asking about extracurriculars, I was asking
Mhm.
more towards like maybe less athletic-based clubs and more academic-based clubs, because that's where I haven't seen as much maybe inclusion or participation of
Yeah.
special education kids. And I'm not sure if this is a hindrance to a lot of them, but I do notice that a lot of clubs in high schools that are like academically based maybe have a competition aspect. So I'd say like DECA, HOSA, TSA, like any of these really big clubs, they do have an overnight aspect, which
Yeah.
may not be supported by.
We do support it.
Okay.
Yes, we do. We will send paraeducators and nurses on overnight travel to support kids with disabilities if that's a need that they have on their IEP.
And then my other question was, this may be kind of a stupid question, but are clubs included when you're evaluating like LRE? Is there ever a situation where a student may be like on the least restrictive part of like classroom instruction, but
Mhm.
maybe need more like help in clubs and extracurriculars?
I love that question. The answer is no, it's not considered as part of their daily schedule, but in my mind, it is one of the more important aspects of your adolescent tenure in school. And that's why I love the fact that we're growing in Unified, because a unified school is a school that is spending time and attention to teaching other students around ways to support an inclusive building and program that gives kids the tools to support a wide variety of learners in a variety of extracurricular and social activities. In fact, one of the things you can look at on the presentation is a student who gave feedback about their experience with unified soccer. And I think it tells a lot about how inclusionary practice benefit both the child with a disability, but even more so the individual without a disability. We gather and share out post-secondary data. And this is an evaluation that we look at for students when they leave us. We do personal reach out and interviews with them to hear how they're doing a year after they've left our system. And the one thing I would draw your attention to is that a number of our students access higher education. And this is exciting when you compare us to the dashed line, which is the state. Kids in Lake Washington are engaging in rigorous post-secondary learning opportunities, which we love to see and actually increase. And it's exciting because there are now a few different colleges that are offering specific programs for individuals with disabilities. Especially Wazoo is offering a really remarkable program, as well as Bellevue College and Highline Community College. So I'm going to skip the rest of those. And we are gathering feedback right now in terms of moving forward with secondary inclusive practices. We have a inclusion advisory with parents and community coming up later this week, where we'll be getting additional feedback from them. And then we have a lot of considerations that we have to be thoughtful about improving inclusionary practice, looking at the requirements and challenges around the systems and structures at secondary, the very real adult bias and beliefs that we have in our larger community, and the importance of planning and collaborating with students and families. I will say this, at the secondary level, you may very well be navigating with a wide variety of family beliefs and values around expectations for their child in high school and beyond high school. We have some families that their expectation is a 4-year degree, and we have other families that do not want their student to participate in the Transition Academy because they do not want their child accessing community employment after they leave school. You have a very significant range of parent thoughts and beliefs, and parents' beliefs and feelings shift and change as they come to a greater relationship and understanding of their child's disability, and how that navigates their adult lives. Yep. Oh, this is just some of the success things we've had. There's been success across the district, so we've seen a lot of wins across our secondary schools as well. Most excited about Transition Academy, by the way.
Thank you
Opening
so
3
much.
businesses.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for coming and sharing. And yes, I believe there is going to be a part 2 that we can continue to. I know there's more questions, and we skipped over quite a bit towards the end of your slides that I'm sure everybody would like to hear the details on. So we'll have a part 2. If anybody has a question now, please feel free to email Dr. Holman, and he'll try and get you the answers before our part 2 session. With that being said,
am I able to write a comment, or are we completely
always.
out of time? I typed it up so I could just read it. Is that okay?
We have 1 minute. Go.
I'll go for it.
Director Yocum.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the efforts that were taken to provide this. I think everyone in this room knows how passionate I am about inclusion in schools and community. I just want to say that focusing on students furthest from educational justice ultimately benefits all students. Segregated classrooms prepare students for segregated society, while inclusive classrooms foster the skills and mindset needed for an inclusive community. When educators shift their perspective and model acceptance for every student, even those with the most complex needs, they create an environment that supports all learners. So I just want a moment to sharing my living, not lived experience, to provide a human aspect to kind of what we've said here. My son, who has complex learning needs, was fully included in elementary school at a level 1 LRE, spending most of his day in general education. In middle school, transitioned to level 2 LRE, spending more time in segregated classrooms. And with our current system, he will likely move to a level 3 LRE in high school, separated even further from his peers. Consider this. If this system remains unchanged, complex learners like my son will graduate having moved from the most inclusive environment to the least. How does this prepare him or his peers for an inclusive society? How are we equipping our students to lead in a diverse and interconnected world? So I just wanted to share that. I didn't have a lot of questions, but just something that is my passion that I just wanted to share with everyone. Thank you.
I share your passion.
All right, since there are no other agenda items this evening, the January 13th, 2025 study session is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry. Am I gonna get in trouble?